Hi everyone, this is Cassidy DeLand, and I'm going to be talking about bringing history to life. This is going to be based off of strategy number 16, incorporating historical reenactment, and this is from our textbook, Integrating Language Arts and Social Studies. Have you ever struggled to teach the past in an engaging way? I know I struggle really hard with teaching social studies because there's so much information that you're expected to give out, but how do you teach it in a way that's engaging and exciting for kids so that they can go on and remember that information? And one of the best ways to do that is to bring history to life, and this is done through historical reenactments. And historical reenactments will bring in an excitement that textbooks and worksheets can't create on their own. So what do you think of when you hear historical reenactment? I'll give you a few seconds to think about that. If you thought role play, you're on the same thinking train that I was. I at first thought of people dressing up in costumes and using props to recreate a historical event. For example, we see a lot of Civil War reenactments like shown in the picture right here. However, that's not the same thing as historical reenactments. But if you are interested in authentic role-playing in the classroom, check out strategy number 14 because there's a really good section on how to do that in a really engaging way. So what is historical reenactment? For example, we have a picture right here that shows an old buttermilk biscuit recipe, and that recipe, recreating this recipe is historical reenactment. It means you take something from the past and you recreate it in today. So, incorporating historical reenactment is a way that historians learn. Historians learn through accurate reconstructions. So, for example, a group of people decided to reconstruct an old Viking ship, as we see in this picture right here, and I'm sure they learned a lot about how the Vikings had to construct their ships back in the day, and I wonder if they used some of the power tools that we have available to us today, or if they used some of the older tools that they were likely to use back in that time period. That's a really great example of historical reenactment. So in our classrooms, we don't have to be making ancient boats, but we can construct models, we can use old recipes, or we can even use older tools or methods to recreate something today. So how does a reenactment work? This is going to take a lot of time and effort on the classroom teacher's part, but it's going to be so worth it at the end. After teachers create an environment where students can learn from the past, students will then be able to construct a model, they can bake with old recipes or use an older tool to create a new object. Why is reenactment important? I found this quote from National Geographic, and it reads, "Reenactors are people who recreate historical events. Reenactments are typically done for the public to entertain and to educate." Well, as a teacher, our public are our students, and we're going to entertain them and educate them all at once, as well as make them the entertainment. They're going to entertain themselves. We're just going to give them a jumping point and help guide them through this process. Also, when we call students things like reenactors and give them a title, it gives them a sense of empowerment, and that also gets them super excited. So if you're doing an archaeology dig in your classroom, call them archaeologists for the day. See how excited they get and how their energy goes up. So why do we have students participate in reenactments? First of all, it helps students completely understand historical events because they are able to compare their experience of their day-to-day life today, as well as compare their experience to the experience that they had during this activity. So there's a lot of different ways we can go about that, and we've already kind of touched base on some of those, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about that later on in this presentation. This also will help students comprehend what happened in their day-to-day life. For example, all of the chores that had to go on in the 1800s on a daily basis are not near the same amount of chores that we have to do today in 2022. This will also help students gain learning opportunities that they wouldn't have if it was done in a non-experimental learning environment. For example, students are going to learn a lot more in an experiential way where they can be hands-on versus reading a textbook and filling out a worksheet. And this is just a really fun way to bring learning opportunities into the classroom. So we will be focusing on making butter in this activity. At the end of this activity, students will be able to make butter from agitated cream. They will be able to observe the change from cream to butter, as well as compare and contrast past methods of making butter and how we make butter today. Some essential questions that I want my kiddos to be thinking about during this process is, where does cream come from? How was butter made in the past versus today? How does your jar look before and after you shake it? And would you want to have to go through this process of making butter every single day? Why or why not? Some connections to the standards in social studies, we're looking at economics, past and present, geography, people, places, and environments. And then in English language arts, we're looking at reading and comprehending memoirs, picture books, and primary sources, as well as being able to write a personal narrative, whether that's a pretend scenario or a real life experience. And we're also going to practice using different writing styles. To get a little bit more specific, let's dive into some of our third grade standards that could be covered during this activity. For language arts, we're looking at being able to write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences. During this, we're going to use effective techniques, descriptive details, and make sure we have a clear event sequence. And then in social studies, we are going to identify examples of human and natural resources that are used to produce goods and services. So to integrate our social studies and ELA standards into one lesson, in social studies, we're going to try and apply reenactment as well as local agriculture. And then in ELA, we're going to work on reading storybooks, or depending on your grade level, you can do primary sources, different types of writing. And then we're also going to work on writing narratives and writing directions. For example, if you wanted your kiddos to start writing directions from beginning to end, you can have them write how to make butter in a jar. So since we're in Dillon, Montana, we're going to go back to the very beginning and start our lesson with, where does cream come from? Obviously, they come from cows. So let's do a field trip. The closest dairy cow farm to Dillon, Montana is in Mount View, Idaho, which is about a little less than 2 hours away. This is a great field trip for kiddos about 5th grade and up to take. However, this is going to depend on your students and if you think they are ready for that kind of a field trip, because it's a big one. An alternative to this field trip is either doing an online virtual field trip, or if the teacher's able and willing, they can even go do the field trip themselves and document that. Or you can simply watch videos, and you can also ask your local community members for help. For example, I know of a few people who have private dairy cows that aren't open to the public. Maybe you can create a relationship with them and have them bring in the cream and explain how to get cream from cows. So post field trip / experience, what can we ask our kiddos to help them start thinking a little bit deeper? We can ask them about why we went on the field trip, what we learned. We can ask about how we milk cows today versus how they were milked in the past. And then, why do you think we got our own cream to make our own butter? Our answers are going to vary depending on our kids, and that's okay. So to make the butter, we're going to have students add about 8 ounces of cream into the jar. They're going to take turns as a team shaking that jar up, and they're going to record on a data sheet all of the things that they experience. So they're going to start with, what does the cream look like? Where do we think we're going to get? What does our cream look like after we shook it? Some grade modifications that we're going to make for our kindergarten to 2nd graders. We're going to have them do a group data sheet. We are also going to give them marbles in their jars if they need a little bit of help trying to agitate their cream a little bit faster. For our 3rd to 5th graders, they can really dive into comparing and contrasting butter today versus butter in the past, and that can mean how we make butter. It could also mean we go buy some butter at the store and we have them compare our homemade butter versus store-bought butter. What are the differences? What are the texture differences, taste differences, so on and so forth. And then our 6th to 8th graders, they can have a lot of fun with this if we make it a competition. Of course, that's going to depend on your kiddos and how they work in competition, but it might be a good place to start out if you're looking for something to do with your kids that revolves making butter. Our English language learners, this will create a content-rich environment for them. They can work in partners or groups, and they will really enjoy this activity as it is very hands-on. There's not a whole lot of talking involved, which will help. We can also give them a word bank with matching pictures to help them understand the vocab words that we're looking at. And then images, of course, are always a great idea with our English language learners. Our children with special needs, for our kiddos that have some attention deficits, this will be great because it is very hands-on. We can do a group data sheet to make sure everyone has it filled out together. For kids who have a hard time holding on to things, we can use double-sided tape to help their little hands stick on a little bit better. And we can also use drop-proof jars to make sure that if it is dropped, it's going to be okay. This is a great modification to make for our younger grades as well. For our assessment, we're going to use a rubric, and this is really just going to go over the worksheet that they did, as well as look at how they interacted with their teammates, how they made their better. And a lot of this is going to be based off of observation of how they work together to make their better. And some final thoughts. I think that historical reenactment gives students the opportunity to construct knowledge they would otherwise not be able to. This is just a really great way to give kids some experience. These lessons are inquiry-based. They're pretty simple to differentiate depending on grade level and students' ability level. This allows us to bring fun experiences right into our own classroom, and it's easy to incorporate language arts by reading, writing, and speaking. So overall, I'm really excited to try this out in my own classroom one day, and hopefully I get the chance to try it out in my field experience as well. And then these are my references.